everybody. I can see we've got a lot of people who have joined us on this webinar. Thank you very much. As Karen said, my name's Claire Agutter. I've been the Chief Architect on the VeriSM project, and I'm also the Director at Scopism, which is a service management, content and e-consultancy organisation. What we're going to do today is I'm going to talk for kind of 20-25 minutes about the VeriSM project itself and just introduce you a little bit to the VeriSM model, some of the key concepts, why we felt the time was right for VeriSM, and some of the people who've been involved as well. And then what I'm going to do is hand over to Steve. And Steve is a VeriSM early adopter who's been doing some amazing work bringing VeriSM to life at his organisation. So again, Steve's going to talk for kind of 20-25 minutes about what he's been doing, and then we've got plenty of time for questions at the end. So by all means, pop your questions into the question box and we will get to as many as we can. And I'm sure that Lisa and Karen, if we miss any off, if there's any that we don't have time to answer, Lisa and Karen will take care of that as well. So what we're going to do is just kick off a little bit with some of the background for VeriSM and really why we felt that now was the right time for a new approach to service management. And what we've got here is a poll for you in the audience. So I'm going to ask you a question which has a yes or no answer, which is digital transformation. Is your organisation undergoing a digital transformation, or does it have some kind of digital transformation plan in place? So hopefully you can see the poll now, and I'll just give you 20-30 seconds to get your answer in there, and then either Lisa or Karen, if you can tell me the results and when that poll's closed, please.
Yeah, hi Claire, I have the poll up for them now.
Thank you.
Okay. How is this audio? Is this okay?
That's a bit better. You're a bit quiet.
So we have about 78 people voted, so we'll be closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Claire. 62% said yes.
Okay.
16% said no, and 22% are not sure if they have a plan in place.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much for that, everybody. Thank you for sharing that with me. That does it does reflect fairly well what we are finding in the UK and Europe, which is that digital transformation is a significant concern for the majority of organisations, and it's actually something that is a concern for organisations at the strategic level and at the board level. This is not something that's just of significant for IT departments. This is something that is concerning organisations as a whole. But it's also a buzzword at the moment, and digital transformation as a concept is being used to sell pretty much everything from software to consultancy to training packages. So it's important for us to be clear what we actually mean when we say digital transformation. So I'm going to pop a definition up here. If you Google for the definition of digital transformation, you'll get a lot of different options, but this sums it up quite nicely, which is what we're looking at is the changes associated with the application of digital technologies across all areas of an organisation. So what we're talking about is how technology is transforming the way that we do business. So we're moving on from things like, email, document storage that's kind of enabling how we do business, but maybe we could live without it if we had to how this is actually completely transforming companies. And if you think about companies like Domino's Pizza, the way that they do business has been completely revolutionized. They do business via their app now, and they actually call themselves a software company that sells pizzas. And if you listen to some of the strategists, they will tell you that every company is going to be a software company ultimately. Whether you believe that's completely true or not, it is an interesting way of thinking about it. If you think about how you interact with your bank, how you interact with your local government departments, technology is transforming everything. So digital transformation is not something that organisations can ignore, and it's something that we need to start to think about as service management professionals. There's been a lot of talk in years gone by about how IT and service management needs to work more closely with the business. We need to just get rid of that concept and say, do you know what, we are the business, and it's our service management skills that are going to help the business with this digital transformation. So what does this mean for organisations? Well, it's actually having a huge impact on the people within businesses. And for those of us who work in service management, we can see this impact. It's really hitting our industry particularly hard, because it's no longer enough for people, certainly within the IT department, it's no longer enough for them to be specialists in one particular area. People need a much broader range of skills, and we need to be much more aware of what our organisation's goals actually are, what the organisation is trying to achieve. And if you think about this, you might have seen this concept of a T-shaped professional, which is now what we need to aspire to, where you have deep specialisation in one area, which is the kind of the line going down on a capital letter T, but then you also have a broad generalist level of knowledge in lots of other areas, which is the line going across the top of the capital letter T. So there's pressure from digital transformation on the staff within organisations, and there's also pressure on how we work. And this might be something that you've seen yourselves in recent years, which is that there's just been this explosion of new ways of working. We've got DevOps, we've got Agile, we've got Lean, SIAM. There's all these different ways and approaches, and there's all these new technologies as well. So what are we doing with Internet of Things? Are we using artificial intelligence, big data, machine learning? There's a huge amount that's going on. And what happens in a lot of organisations is, because it's not linked to our strategic direction and our governance, we end up chasing lots of things and pulling in different directions. And if we bring this down to a service management example, what we see in a lot of the organisations that we work with is you'll have a fairly traditional ITIL service management department, but then you'll have development teams that are doing Agile and DevOps, and you actually end up with a clash, because your traditional change management process is trying to follow the normal steps. They want to have change advisory boards, you want to have requests for change, but then you've got your Agile teams and your DevOps teams that want to do continuous integration, continuous deployment. They've automated the entire delivery chain, and you end up with a bit of a bump. So what we were trying to do with VeriSM is bring some sanity to this picture and say there are all these different ways of working out there. They all have benefits, and there are all these different technologies that are available to us, and they all have benefits. How do we pick the right mix for us? What do we need to do in order to achieve our business goals? So the big driver for VeriSM, the big reason behind it, was the fact that things have changed and things have become much more complex, and it's no longer enough to have ITIL within your IT department. There are all these other ways of working. How do we knit them all together? What's the glue that holds all of these things together? So last year, I was approached by a new organisation, which is this IFDC that you can see here, the International Foundation for Digital Competencies. And the IFDC is a non-profit foundation, but on the board of IFDC, you've got some industry names that you'll probably be quite familiar with. So organisations like APMG, BCS, Exin, Van Haren, the publishing company, they're all people who've been involved in the service management industry for a long time, but they felt that the time was right to kind of take another look. IFDC actually did a survey in 2017 and they asked 4,000 people if they felt that existing service management practices had kept up with the changes in the way that we work, and 75% of the people that they asked came back and said no, they didn't think that service management practices had kept up with how we were working and the demands that are now being placed on service management. So IFDC approached me and said, would I like to act as the chief architect for VeriSM and just take a new look at service management, take a fresh look at how we work, how we need to work, and what we need to change and evolve in this digital world that we're all living in. So I jumped at the chance because, you know, dream project of a lifetime. And what we did was we put together a global author team of just as many people as we could persuade to work with us, really. We wanted a diverse range of opinions. We wanted diversity of age, gender, location, industry background, levels of experience. We wanted a big author group. So we worked in 2017 with a team of 4 lead authors. So that was myself, Suzanne Van Hove, Randy Steinberg and Rob England. And we wrote the first VeriSM book, which was published in October 2017. And in that book, we proposed a new approach for service management, which was VeriSM. And the key concepts there were that VeriSM is an evolving and integrated service management approach for this digital age. So there's just a handful of the faces that were involved on this slide. Some of them you might recognise, some of them maybe you're not so familiar with, but we worked really hard to get a very diverse author team, and that led to some really stimulating debate. You know, we had some amazing conference calls, and that really helped us create something that was valuable and is going to be relevant around the world. You can see here some of the companies that contributed to the VeriSM books as well. So we've got 3 of our VeriSM early adopters on there. So CITIC Tech is adopting VeriSM in China. You've got 6.6 out of the UK, which is Steve, who's going to talk to you very soon. And we've got Kabu.com, who are VeriSM early adopters in Japan. Again, I think, you know, you'll see some logos on there that you recognize. We've got some industry giants like Microsoft and ServiceNow who've been involved. And then again, we've got some smaller organizations like Hippo Digital, who are a niche digital design organization based out of the UK. But again, we went for global, and we went for companies who have a story to tell. So for example, Auto Trader was a print magazine. They used to print magazines where you could sell your car and it came out every week, and they transformed to an entirely online organization, and they shared their story as one of the case studies in the book. And it's things like that that kind of have given organizations inspiration, showing organizations how some industries, some companies have gone through digital transformation, kind of gives you the seeds and gives you stories to read that can help you start on your own digital journey. So I'm going to mention a few VeriSM key concepts. If you want more detail on this, if you go to the verism.global website, there's a 40-minute presentation on there which talks in much more detail about VeriSM key concepts. But the first thing that we wanted to do is kill this idea that IT lives in one bubble and the rest of the business lives in the other. Because if we're thinking about digital products and services, IT can't deliver those on its own, cut off from the rest of the organisation. If you think about a project like a new website that an organisation is going to sell its products through, Yes, that's a technical project, but in order for that website to be successful, you need to have your sales team involved, marketing, branding, logistics. There's so much else going on. So we said, let's talk about service management from the perspective of the organisation. And let's think about things like IT, human resources, sales, marketing, finance as capabilities of the organisation. So when we say our IT capability, we're not necessarily talking about the IT department. We probably will be including the IT department, but we could also include what we call shadow IT, that exists elsewhere in the organisation. That's just as much part of our IT capability. We're including anything that we've outsourced to a third-party provider. So if we're using Amazon Web Services, that's part of our IT capability. So thinking about capabilities rather than teams or departments gives us this much more joined up and holistic view of the organisation. Every capability is lined up behind the outcomes that the organisation wants to achieve. IT is no longer on its own, kind of pretending it's a business within a business and trying to run itself like that. So this is the VeriSM model, and we kept this deliberately as high level as we could, because the whole point about VeriSM is giving organisations the freedom to work in the way that they want to work. So you'll see that it's driven by the consumer. So understanding what the consumer wants, and then once something's been delivered, having that feedback from the consumer to help us improve what we deliver. But you'll also notice down at the bottom, governance and service management principles. Now, Steve's going to give you some brilliant examples of these when he goes into his session. But really, the governance piece is about understanding, what are we trying to do as an organisation? What is our goal, whether we're public sector, private sector? What do we exist to do? Because then based on that, we can define what we've called service management principles. And these service management principles act as the guardrails for all of our product and service teams. So for example, if we are a government organisation, we might have organisational targets about efficient use of funds, reducing redundancy, not having any duplication within our services. That can then become part of our service management principles. So from a product or service perspective, if we want to get rid of duplication, we need to give our team some guardrails about making sure we reuse service elements as much as possible. So those principles will cover things like change management, financial management, use of resources. But the key is, once we define those principles, our product and service teams can work using whatever working practices they want to. You can be agile, you can be doing DevOps, you can be doing ITIL. It doesn't matter as long as you stay within those service management principles. So you can see a product or service life cycle here, define what we're trying to do, produce something, provide it to our consumers, and then respond to their feedback. And that is kept again very high level, because you might be working in a waterfall fashion, you might be following agile development. Doesn't matter, everything's going to go through those stages, whether it's iteratively and incrementally, or whether it's in a much more sort of formal and structured waterfall way. But you can see the management mesh surrounding that. And this is the thing that is absolutely unique to VeriSM. So I'm going to kind of move on, because this screen shows you the management mesh in a bit more detail. So you can see the sides of the mesh. You've got resources, emerging technologies, management practices, and environment. And basically what we're saying here is, these are all of the elements that combine to produce digital products and services. So if you are an organisation that has digital products and services, you need to be thinking about, do we have the right resources? And that includes, the skills that maybe we need to take advantage of some of these emerging technologies. Do we have the right management practices in place? And are they actually all working together as well? You know, if we're doing DevOps and we're doing ITIL, is that working seamlessly, or are we getting some conflicts? From an emerging technologies perspective, what do we need to pay attention to? What is relevant for us as an organisation? Because again, in the European market, there's an awful lot of organisations talking about things like artificial intelligence, chasing it because it looks cool and it looks trendy, but they don't actually need it. So for every product and service, we're evaluating emerging technologies, but we are not necessarily using them unless it's justified to do so. So some of these will feel fairly comfortable to you know, service management people. We're used to thinking about our resources, we're used to thinking about our environment. What's new here is looking at the emerging technologies and the management practices, and then thinking about how all of that meshes together. So if we walk through an example here, the first thing we need to do as an organisation is think, what do we do well? You know, what do we have within our organisation? So if we think about it from a resources perspective, what have we got? So in terms of the staff that we need, have we got the right staff? In terms of the suppliers that we need, do we have the right suppliers? And whilst this isn't a really in-depth architectural diagram, it's more of a visual tool to help stimulate conversations. You can use the length of the line to indicate quantity or maturity. So for example, if you know that you've not got enough knowledge within the organisation, you can make that line quite short to indicate that there is a knowledge gap that needs to be filled. The same with your environment. Have we got the right culture? You know, do we have the right partners? Do we have the right processes and tools in place? Same with our management practices, and again with our emerging technologies. So we can build a mesh of our organisation as it is now, and that's going to help us identify gaps and also help us identify redundancies as well. Because then as we start to move towards developing new products and services, we can start to think about, well, what do we actually need? Where have we got these gaps? You know, what don't we have? And again, you can start to map those, and you can start to think about, what do we actually need to acquire and put in place in order to deliver these products and services. So again, if we take the example here of the purple line, the emerging technologies, we've got an organisation that's identified that it needs some artificial intelligence capabilities. So that's going to include the technologies, but it's also probably going to involve the people and the knowledge and maybe the partners that we then need to exploit that effectively. So it's a good way of looking at what we've got, and then as our products and services evolve, it's a good way of then looking at, and what do we actually need and how do we move towards that position. So you can see this is a really unified view of the organisation, and you can imagine that this is a visual tool that you could take into your board. You know, you could take it into the C-level of the organisation and say, this is the representation, and it's something that you don't need any kind of specialist knowledge to be able to understand. So the story so far is that the first VeriSM book was published in 2017. We proposed this new approach to service management, and the growth of VeriSM has been rapid and it's been global. We've had interest from all over the world. Like I said, we've got early adopters in China, in Japan, and in the UK. But when we published the first book, the biggest question that we got back was, that's brilliant, but how do I make that work in my organisation? So the second VeriSM book is coming out, and again, I think that's going to be late September, early October that that's published. And that's the practitioner's guide. That gives you the information that you need to actually do VeriSM in your organisation. So there's a lot more detail there, and it includes a really comprehensive case study that we walk through too, that kind of takes you from a healthcare organization based in the United States. It kind of walks you through its journey as it introduces a new wellness wearable, a fitness tracking device. It walks you through that progression through the management mesh. So that new book's coming soon. There's also going to be VeriSM authors and VeriSM presenters at some of the conferences that are coming in the US. So at Fusion and Service Management World, there's going to be some VeriSM people there too. But one thing you will find if you do have access to the books is we've deliberately written them in a very accessible way. These are not kind of weighty tomes that are really, really difficult to read. We've kept the language as accessible as possible. And there's a ton of case studies, stories, examples in there just to help you bring all of this to life. So if you want to find more information, you can go to verism.global, and there's always information about forthcoming events and things on there. We did a webinar. We've got a webinar coming up on the 4th of September, which is 90 minutes of the management mesh in action. So real detail there about using the management mesh. And then on September 18th, we've got another webinar, which is really kind of open to audience questions. So I think that the first VeriSM webinar we did, we had more than 100 people. So that one's going to be much more opportunity for people to ask questions. And again, you can register for those. There's the links there, but you can register for those via the verism.global website. And the kind of official book launch is going to be at Fusion. So if you are attending Fusion, then you will see some of the VeriSM team represented there. So that's kind of a real whirlwind tour of, you know, why VeriSM, where's it come from, what is it we're actually trying to achieve. And now I'm going to hand over to Steve, who is going to share his story of being a VeriSM early adopter and hopefully bring some of this information to life a bit more for you, so that then you can kind of see how it's being applied in the real world. And then we'll still have time for questions at the end. So I'll go quiet for now, and if we can hand over to Steve, please.
Thank you very much, Claire.
Hi, Steve.
First of all,
Steve, this is Karen. Can you hear me okay? This is Karen.
I can hear you, Karen. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. And may I do your intro for you?
Yes, if you'd like. I've got a little intro built into the slide as well, but if you'd like to do a short intro, and then I'll launch my slides. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So Steve Leach is head of Service Cloud Gateway at 6.6. He has over 20 years experience in ITIL service management, including service desk change, service level management, IT continuity, and training. He holds the ITIL expert certification, as well as VeriSM, TOGAF, and ISO 20000 certifications. And thank you for joining us today, Steve.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Now, can you see my slides okay?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, good. So good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be able to have this opportunity to join this webinar. As Claire says, webinars are always such fun. What I'm going to do is a little bit more of an introduction.
Excuse me, Steve. I'm sorry, yeah. Steve. I'm sorry. You were on full presentation screen, and then you went off to another screen.
That was still my screen, Karen. I don't think Steve's presenting. So if I click to stop sharing.
Hold on a moment.
I haven't seen the become presenter menu. Here we go.
Do you see it?
I see it now.
Okay.
Now, can you just see my screen now?
Perfect.
Right. Has it advanced to my content slide?
Yes, it has.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Here's what I'm going to talk about for the next 20, 25 minutes. A little bit more about myself, but particularly how and why I discovered VeriSM and why it is so relevant. I'll tell you a little bit about 6.6 and the Cloud Gateway product and why VeriSM is so useful for that. So rather than read the content slide and insult everybody's intelligence, let me go into it. So this is me. I am head of service for a company called 6.6 and our Cloud Gateway product. Now, I've been in and around the ITIL world for the best part of a quarter of a century. And at an age when I could have been thinking about retirement, an old colleague of mine from Vodafone headhunted me and said, come along and help us put in a service management model for this thing called Cloud Gateway. Now, with my experience, I've always worked for big corporates, now the UK Ministry of Defence or some local authorities, telecoms providers like Cable and Wireless and Vodafone, international service integration companies using their SIAM model, such as Serco. But I've also been an ITIL trainer, during which I enjoyed it so much and became successful. I was actually nominated by the British Computer Society for the Trainer of the Year Awards in 2008. Now, although I didn't make the top three, as far as I'm concerned, that was my 15 minutes of fame, so that was quite interesting. So I'm absolutely passionate about ITIL, and I know it makes a difference, and I'm a bit of an evangelist. But what I discovered very quickly when taking out this new role, when joining 6.6, is that it's a small company, very dynamic. They wanted quick turnover of new products, new technology. They wanted new customers onboarded in weeks rather than months. So while I was very, very happy implementing an ITIL support model at the rear end of the end-to-end delivery, it was quite clear quite soon that that was going to be a bit of a problem. And now there's an ITIL refresh taking place, and I suspect that some of the issues and concerns people have will be addressed with that. But what I decided that I needed something other than ITIL. And I was pointed in the direction of Claire and VeriSM by a good friend in Vodafone. And after 5 or 10 minutes talking to Claire, I thought to myself, well, this is exactly what I need. I need something that gives our development guys the ability to develop and transition something very quickly with minimum governance, but under the knowledge that when it crosses the boundary into operational support, or responds, as VeriSM calls it, we've got a 25 years of best practice ITIL processes matured to use, so we don't have to reinvent the support model. So it became pretty clear to me very soon that VeriSM is just what I needed. And this is why, because 6.6 is a fairly young but rapidly growing consultancy organisation based in London, in the UK. Now, what they provide to a number of very high profile public and private sector customers is digital transformation. So I was quite interested to see that poll at the start. About 62% said yes and 16% said no. So digital transformation, cybersecurity and big data are the consultancy arms of 6.6. But as well as those consultancy arms, there is this product, this solution, this product called Cloud Gateway, which is a suite of products which enable any IT provider, any supplier, any business, it enables them to actually connect securely to their, oh, sorry, I'm just seeing a Slack message trying to bounce through, but fortunately I've hidden my icon, so that wasn't coming. Sorry, it threw me a second there. So Cloud Gateway enables any business to connect securely to their chosen cloud provider. You don't need loads of infrastructure, loads of security and hundreds of staff. We will do it for you. And I needed to understand a bit about that technology, a bit about how it was developed, and a bit about how dynamic it is. And I pretty soon realized that the combination of the young, keen guys we've got developing, the need for them to be able to carry on working within their DevOps, NetOps, and Agile way, but my need to put in a sustainable support model meant that VeriSM was absolutely right. Now, I was fortunate enough to get to know Claire well enough to realize that as an early adopter, one of the things I've shamelessly taken advantage of in what I could call my VeriSM journey is the small size of our organization and not having too many people to turn around. Once I'd got our CEO, CIO, and CFO on board, it was easy to persuade them that VeriSM was what I needed and to put it in place and to gain their complete buy-in from day one. And it was also clear straight away to me that here's an organization who has nothing to do with working in silos. How many people can say that on the day one of their induction, they were met by the CFO, the CTO, the head of marketing, the head of sales, the head of HR, all working together in the same environment? That was quite an eye-opener, having spent many years working in large corporates. So in about April this year, I was able, with Claire's help, to join one of her ITSM crowd presentations. And I was able to explain to that audience why VeriSM was so appropriate, how I'd implemented it, and give a bit of a presentation on where I was at the time. Now, with a dynamic company in our 6.6 Cloud Gateway having to move quickly, and with the E in VeriSM standing for evolving, nothing has stood still. So this slide here that I'll just take you through briefly shows what I did then and now and how we're moving forward. So to enable to support our customers for Cloud Gateway, we needed a service management organization. So we needed to recruit sufficient staff. We purchased what we believed to be the leading industry strength service management tool, ServiceNow, which we were going to use to support our customers. We recruited and trained a ServiceNow administrator. We recruited and trained, including myself, 3 people up to VeriSM foundation level, which we've all found a very interesting course and very useful. All of our support personnel and some of the other guys within 6.6, we trained them up to ITIL foundation level. We signed and agreed service level agreements with our customers. All of the ITIL support processes we use in the response stage have been flowcharted, documented, tested, and agreed, and now give us the outputs and the interfaces we need. Going back to Claire's slide, I had a good think about what our service management principles should be, what our governance rules should be, and we've also got an outline management mesh to show you later. And rather than show the color progress bars as Claire did, what my team have tried to do is to break it down to a lower level from generic into a bit more detail that works for us. One of the final things I did is our DevOps manager came up with a brilliant quote, which I never tire of using. He looked me straight in the face and he said, ITIL is the enemy of DevOps. And I thought, right, I'm going to use this. So the first thing I did was persuaded him to pass his ITIL foundation course. So at least he knew what his enemy was. He recognized his enemy. Then I explained to him how not only was it not his enemy, not only was VeriSM not going to reinvent ITIL, all I was doing was putting in a service management organization that enabled him and his colleagues to use whatever techniques they could, develop as rapidly as they could, and as long as they stuck to the service management principles, I would be able to put in an ITIL model behind them that supported what he'd done. So I needed to get his buy-in, and it worked, and it was very successful. So that's an update on what's happened in my world in the last few months. Now, one of the comments on Claire's slide was, how do I make this work? Well, this is my attempt to make this work. Now, bear in mind, we're a small niche company with a niche product, so what I'm going to say will not work for anybody, but it has worked for us. So what I would say is, let's have a look at this. Where are we now? Claire talked about the need for governance and service principles. I've worked for big corporates who sometimes had anything between 5 and 8 governance gates that you needed to pass through in order to transition a new customer and in order to bring some new technology online. All for very good reasons. I'm not going to take a cheap shot at it. But when you're in a smaller company working much more rapidly, you can't stop and have 8 checks with the DevOps guys. You can only have a few. So we built 3 simple governance gates that work to our advantage. The second thing I've done is our service management model. I've shared it with Claire and I've shared it with the IFDC, the organization she gave you a little background to in her slide earlier on. The IFD are so interested in this that they're planning to launch something called a VeriSM Starter Kit internationally. And if I can be part of that, then great. That will justify all the time and effort. It'd be very rewarding. Initial discussions look promising. So what we're doing on behalf of the IFDC with them is to turn our model into something more generic, something a bit more that religiously follows the VeriSM model, so other people can benefit from what we've done and they can create a template. What I've also done, and I will urge anybody on the call who's interested in cloud computing or in VeriSM or in how we've implemented this, the link there is to the service management section of our new website, where I've shown a couple of documents we've done. I've linked some things together. This slide pack will be linked there as well. Now, as well as retaining and enhancing the presence in London, we've opened an office in Leeds in the UK. The Northern Powerhouse was a big thing in the UK many, many years ago. So we're taking advantage of that. We're going to place our service desk, our service delivery manager, who has been helping me develop the management mesh, and our development staff. So we've got the development people who will actually be developing new iterations of Cloud Gateway for new customers on the same site as the team who will be supporting them. That's another great way. I know we shouldn't be strained by geography, but by putting the people who need to work together in the office together is another good way of removing the silos. And we've done that, and it's already bearing fruit. So finally on this slide, what have I done? We have also recruited our own dedicated sales and marketing staff. And marketing staff have been playing a blind, absolutely outstanding in marketing and getting the name and getting the visibility of Cloud Gateway out there so our sales guys can come in and sell it. The HR people are helping recruit the staff we need. And I've got a vision one day of the management mesh with its skill set there being an additional portfolio to the HR team so they can actually recruit people with the right skills. And as I said, we've got our development and our support teams working together in a shared office in Leeds. We have completely removed all silos. We all work together as one big family, and it really does feel like that. So I mentioned 3 governance gates. Here they are. They work for me. They work for me in our startup and our cloud computing environment. They won't work for everybody, but they are examples of things you can do. So at the define stage over on the left here, we have what we call a service management principles gate. Now, our service management principles at the moment are very high level. They include things like, we want to be the IT provider that customers enjoy working with. We want to use the customer's systems as much as possible rather than forcing them into our ways of working. We want to be able to develop things dynamically with minimum governance that get to transition within 5 to 6 weeks. And our major service management principle is we want to be able to plug it straight into our sustainable service model that I'm building. So we take the service blueprint, VeriSM speak, but that may be a high-level design document or some high-level document, and we sit down before any physical building has been created. We sit down with our developers, our DevOps and NetOps people, and we look at governance rules, which are that top document, and we look at the service management principles, and we say, a quick question, guys, can you just confirm you're still on track, you're still obeying these documents, and I don't need to have a rethink? A very small, simple 15-minute governance gate. Hopefully that's all it takes. Now, gate 2 will take place at the produce stage in VeriSM. What we're calling this is the change gate. And we're going to use ServiceNow because it's the tool we found most useful, because the change management module is very powerful. We're going to create a change template, sort of a transition template, and we're going to ask all the sensible questions that you would ask as an ITIL change manager. Have you considered the risk? Have you considered the resources? What about the costs? What about the customer's business criticality? What about the technology you're using? In other words, is there anything here we need to revisit, or can we approve this change that has been submitted by the developers and NetOps to give us an audit trail in our tool to say, this is where the product has got to, this is what we're doing, what do you think, guys? And we get all the stakeholders to approve or not that change. Once that change is approved, our developers, they go off and they will start their 2-week agile sprints of develop, build, test, develop, build, test. We will be involved in some of those tests because my service team will have earlier on in the cycle collected and documented some scenarios, some user acceptance, some user information, which we will use to create a user acceptance testing, which we will then use to create our incident severities, to plug into the ServiceNow incident module to make sure we are actually measuring and recording what matters to the customer. So moving into the gate 3. Gate 3 now, I've worked in various organizations who call this HOTS, handover to service, or who called it AILS, acceptance into live service, or who called it onboarding. I like the onboarding analogy better. So before we onboard this new customer, before we say to them, you are ready to start using this and we are ready to support you, we have a document here called an onboarding checklist. That goes through a number of questions that says, is the service desk ready? Have our service desk agents been told about this new customer? Do they know which part of ServiceNow to use? Are they fully trained? Has the customer briefing pack been delivered? Is the customer ready? Do we know how frequently we're supposed to producing reports? Has my service manager been trained to how to produce reports out of ServiceNow and present them to this customer? In other words, are we ready now to press the button and go live? This is the final governance gate. So the input is the new solution, the new technology, and all the work we've done. The output is a statement in the audit trail that says we are ready for deployment. So those are my 3 simple governance gates. Now they work within this slide, within this big end-to-end model. And I make no apologies for the fact I've broken the rules of flowcharting and I've broken the rules of presentations. I could not possibly get this model on one piece of paper. So I've tried to get as much as I could. And while I recognize that you may not necessarily be able to read what's in the boxes, it's more important that you see I've created a vertical swim lane version. So this service management model is very dynamic. I had a good session with our managing director yesterday where we made some refinements of it. So this slide is already out of date, but that's the way we need to work in our dynamic environment. All of these gray logos here, these gray symbols, are documents. Each of these documents are ones that are key to my VeriSM model. They all have a defined owner and a purpose. These diamond shapes in blue are the governance gates you saw on the previous slide. Each of those governance gates also has an owner and a defined purpose. And then what I've done is I've created vertical swim lanes to bring all the stakeholders together. So the swim lane on the left is our consumer or our customer, and it shows what interfaces we have with them. The middle swim lane is another way of me saying you do not need to work in vertical silos. An IT product or solution now is owned and provided for by the entire organization. So this is our sales and marketing, our product manager, our commercial, our legal, and our HR department, with a number of green boxes showing me what they do, how they work, and how it interfaces with my team. The middle swim lane is where our developers carry on. They integrate the design, they collect some information from the customer, they agree, is it going to be a full version or a proof of concept? And once the change is approved, they embark upon their 2-week agile sprints, the output of which is a new implementation that needs to be delivered to the customer. And then my world is the final box on this one, the blue stuff, the service stuff, starting from collecting some customer use cases, ending up obviously with us turning it on and going live. So that's an extract of my vertical model. A horizontal one is what I've supplied to Lisa and Karen on the call, part of IFDCS and various other members of the worldwide VeriSM community, particularly so the IFDC can use this as a template if they wish. And again, I'm not saying it's completely refined enough for their use, but a version of this works for me. If other people can benefit from it, then fantastic. So another couple of slides, then I'll hand over to do some questions. Now, this is my current working management mesh. Claire showed one earlier on where she got coloured bars going horizontally and vertically. What I've tried to do is, I hope we're not trying to be too clever, but as you can see on the left, it is work in progress. But we've said our resources under people are sales, technical support, marketing, and HR. The knowledge we need, we are going to use forums, wikis, FAQs, and known errors to be able to provide all the support we need for our customer. Our partners are listed on that last vertical axis there. And down on the left, under emerging technologies, we recognize that big data, robotics, automation, and cloud computing are the world we're in. The management practices we have at the bottom are ITIL, and I've just put the ITIL stages of the life cycle in there prior to the refresh to remind everybody that strategy, design, transition, operation, and CSI are still very much foremost in our thinking. We're not going to reinvent ITIL, and we're not going to chuck this out. So there's an attempt to actually document in terms of the management mesh, the technologies, the resources, the environment, and the practices that A, we are part of, and B, we need to try and use to our advantage for our customers. So the way ahead, where is it we're going now? As I said yesterday, it's very dynamic. We had a good conversation yesterday with our managing director and with our finance manager about how we can actually create something so they can produce a commercial model for new customers based on what I've done. So that was an interesting conversation. In order to do that, I'm going to mature this management mesh into a tool that can be used in all areas of our business. As the Cloud Gateway product continues to evolve and new customers wish to use it, I will continually review that model that I showed you 2 slides ago, so it remains fit for purpose. In a dynamic environment like I've got, something that's fit for purpose 3 months ago is already 3 months out of date in theory. I'm going to share the mature version if I can with the IFDC, so the VeriSM starter kit not only has a template that people in the world can use for VeriSM if they wish, it can show them a completed example, which will be my model. And I'm hoping I recently had an email from Claire about some user groups and some various organizations and forums I want to be part of. Because I am so passionate about VeriSM, possibly as passionate as I was about ITIL when I was an ITIL trainer, because it's great, it's common sense, and it works. I want to be able to continue to contribute to the evolution and maturity of VeriSM. And finally, here's my vision statement. You've got to have a high target to aim at. Through my service management model and with the organization I work for, we are aiming to become a world leader in providing VeriSM-based service management to our customers. That's where we want to go with our model, and that's how hopefully people like yourselves on the call and other people we presented to can help us contribute to this. So that's the end of my presentations. Now, I don't know, Claire, Lisa and Karen, whether I want to actually take questions now or whether I should hand back. I think probably the time is now for me to hand back to the ladies running this call, and we'll take questions generally about the introduction and both mine and Claire's presentations. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. I really hope that I've convinced you that if you need to find an approach that gives you the flexibility to develop new products and get them to market quickly and to transition new customers quickly in an agile way, while at the same time having a sustainable support model, then I've got to say, VeriSM is for you. Thank you very much.